Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're finally going to be talking about the newest album from Drake, called Views. I don't know if I'm the right person to do this review. Now, I can imagine that statement's a little bit surprising coming from me. I'm a music critic. I've covered Drake's last two albums, not really counting that one he did with Future that I effectively reviewed over several episodes of Billboard Breakdown anyway. And at this moment, I live in downtown Toronto. I'm a Raptors fan. At this point, I could see the argument that I'd be the perfect choice to cover Drake, given the overexposure and proximity. But you know what? That might be part of the problem. I've covered so many Drake songs, such intricate detail, I've been swamped with this guy that I was oversaturated 8 months ago and heartily sick of Drake in 6 months. And that would have happened if he was a great artist or not. There was just so much Drake. And the more projects I hear, the less I like him. Yeah, he's an emotive singer. He's got an ear for some atmospheric production that I've always really liked. He can come up with some good hooks and the occasional clever line. But for everything I like about Drake, it's incredibly easy to find a lot of problems. Sure, he's an emotive performer, but he traffics in melodrama that doesn't have the good sense to go over the top. And over the past year, he's leaned further away from R&B, which I actually think he's a pretty good singer, and more towards hip-hop. And let me stress, that's not always been a good thing. The biggest defense of Drake's writing is that he's very good with saying a lot with very little. But when you hear so much similar subject matter that the little differences between the songs stop standing out, and considering how monochromatic and occasionally dull his production can be, that's not a good sign. And it gets particularly exasperating when Drake hops on southern or triplet flows that don't flatter him or help him stand out in the slightest. As for content, Drake tends to fall into one of two molds: a swaggering arrogance that used to be smarter and more self-aware, and his more emotive side, which can tread right up to the line of bad taste. And yet, as the years have progressed, the self-awareness and commentary that used to temper Drake's best material, like on Take Care, has fallen away, which cranked up the obnoxiousness and made his ego feel, well, a lot less earned. Because let's be brutally honest here from a hip-hop perspective. Drake didn't so much win the Meek Mill beef as Meek Mill lost it in spectacular fashion. And if faced with, say, real competition, and if Untitled Unmastered is any indication, it will probably be Kendrick Lamar in the end, I don't believe for a second that Drake has a chance against any real MC out for blood. So with all that on the table, I can't even pretend to be excited that Views was finally getting released, likely as the last straw to free Drake from his contract with Young Money. But even though Hotline Bling, it had its moments, One Dance and Pop Style are both mediocre songs at best, and that's really a bad sign if they're your lead-off singles. Considering this record was reportedly around 20 tracks, especially considering if you're reading this, It's Too Late went long, I did not expect this album to be remotely good. Now, that being said, I did used to be a fan of Drake around 2011, and hell, if Beyonce can surprise me the way she did with Lemonade, there's no reason that Drake couldn't do something similar. So, what views did we get from the six? Well, I gotta be honest, folks. This album took a lot out of me. As you can probably all tell, I didn't expect this to be good, and it's not, let's establish that now. But in good conscience, I won't say this is a bad album either. It's got a couple good songs, enough to counterbalance the parts that really pissed me off. Instead, it's the sort of album that can be painful as a critic to get through. It's a filler album. If you've heard a Drake record, you have heard all of this done before, done better elsewhere. But the larger problem stems in that I got nothing in the instrumentation or the lyrics or performances on this album. And considering that it runs well over 80 minutes, that's a problem. So let's start off with Drake himself. In contrast to If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, Drake pivoted back towards R&B with a lot more singing, even with styles that pull a little bit on dancehall and Afrobeat. Granted, it's very colorless and often mishandled genre fusion, but we'll get to that in the instrumentation. And the larger point is that Drake, he is back in his lane. He's not jumping on other people's flows, he's not openly biting other people's styles. Drake seems very much in his own comfort zone. Maybe a little bit too comfortable, because there are very few moments where Drake seems like he's actively invested in what he's singing or spitting about. Now, this is most evident on tracks like You With Me, where Drake starts rapping on the first verse, sings on the second, and only really brings real passion into his vocals after the beat shifts on the third verse. And again, if Drake barely cares about what he's saying, why should I care? At least when Drake's in more of a hip-hop lane, he sounds engaged about what he's spitting, and we get some decent energy on 9 and Hype, at least before the hook, or on Weston Street Flows, which I actually really liked, or maybe on the title track. Hell, Grammys feels like a What a Time to Be Alive leftover, and I honestly think that Future upstage Drake in energy if not bars. And when Drake samples the late Pimp C on Faithful, there's more fire in half a verse than on half of this album. And it's not like Drake helps himself. We can tell he hastily pulled out Kanye West's verse from Pop Style and wedged in his own because he got upstaged. The transition is jarring, and look, the verse isn't any good. At least with R&B, Drake can build some okay, low-key vibes. But then you get moments like the DBSN verse on Faithful, or Majid Al-Mascati on the Summer's Over interlude. Moments of passion that actually have some soul to them and I actually quite liked. I guess Rihanna, she sounds fine on Too Good, but the larger issue is that when compared to Auntie earlier this year, this almost feels token. She doesn't feel like she's really trying. Hell, even when she was on Famous with Kanye West, she sounded like she was giving more of herself there. So I might as well get to lyrics and themes, if you can even say that there is something here, because a lot of this, you've heard it before. Of course, Drake is going to continue taking subliminal shots at Meek Mill as if that hasn't been driven into the ground at this point, and trying to entrench himself in the rap game that I've never remotely bought. Again, I've heard so many MCs that could run circles around Drake, but the larger topic is a lot of Drake's issues surrounding women. We've heard this before, and while I've mostly understood why women find Drake appealing on earlier records due to some of his vulnerability and the fact he is a good singer, I have no idea why anyone would find Drake's entitled bitching remotely attractive on this album. Take You With Me, where after the DMX quote, he sends a DM to all of his exes saying they still belong to him. That goes on forever, and I think we'll just get closer when we're not together. That's creepy more than anything, especially on a song where he's questioning his girl's loyalty under the assumption that she's playing games, when in reality, it's probably just some justifiable caution here. Drake, people don't need to make up stories about you when you do it to yourself. Or take Faithful, a song about a late night hookup, and Drake still feels the need to nag his prospective girl, implying her concerns about fidelity are just lodged in her vagina because, hey, women, right? Or on Child's Play, where on a song where he's treating his girl to a new outfit, he still implies that she's childish amid threats that he's gonna give her back to the hood. And of course, we have Hotline Bling, which you've all heard by now. The song where Drake feels the need to guilt trip his ex for moving on with their life by saying that she should stay at home and be a good girl for him. Even Drake acknowledges on the title track that if I was you, I wouldn't like me either. The one smidge of self-awareness in the framing that he's behaving like a self-involved, drama-tripping, controlling asshole. And you know, that can actually work if said drama is actually compelling. The problem is that this record doesn't really cut deeper or provide analysis or have any real subtext in anything that's relevant or personal to Drake right now. He's built his career on reminiscence. He can even acknowledge that, and after having hammered most of those into the ground, he's searching for new material. I mean, I guess I did appreciate redemption for verses that at least show a little bit of self-reflection in Drake, and that his controlling, manipulative lies might be a problem, or at least distort that he might mean well or have good intentions, but this record doesn't build on any of that whatsoever. And even that song lapses into self-pity on the final verse for all the people who just don't understand him. He's looking for apologies for Christmas. And sure, when you get a song like Too Good with Rihanna that focuses on a dissolving relationship thanks to no proper communication, that can kind of work, even if I do feel the attitude of entitlement of both people in the song is kind of insufferable. But on the flip side, you get Feel No Ways, where Drake wanted to get serious, the girl, she wasn't into it, and now that he's gone from her, she's blasting him unfairly, all framed to make him look like the victim. And if Drake wants to play such a dominant character on tracks like Controlla, I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second. But okay. Issues with Drake's storytelling, victim complex, and complete lack of ideas aside, how's the production on this album? How's the music? Honestly, kind of a mess, mostly eschewing the darker, more hard-hitting material that he previously brought in his last project for tracks that don't nearly go as hard. Now, part of this was inevitable with the pivot back to R&B, and we do get some slick, classy vibes on songs like Keep the Family Close, The Strings, and some potent closing bombast, or the Mary J. Blige sample on Weston Road Flows, probably my favorite song on the album, or even the jingling bounce of Child's Play. Hell, I even like most of the very sparse Fire and Desire with the Brandy samples before they decided to drop in the Chipmunk vocals. But it raised the problem that the fidelity and mixing and mastering of several of these songs just feels unfinished and sloppy. One Dance is the most obvious example. I've already talked about it on Billboard Breakdown, but swamping out the melody and WizKid on the bridge by an incredibly tinny interlude and bass wobble that gets way too choppy does not help cure the impression that there was very little effort put into that song, especially considering how checked out Drake sounded on it. Or take Pop Style. Was there no effort whatsoever whatsoever to match the vocal pickup on Drake's verses, because it feels incredibly slapdash, him shoving in his own verse there. Or go to Feel No Ways, with a very lo-fi drum machine pickup and backing sample that has some flavor, but doesn't really feel well blended with Drake's vocals or the cello on the outro. And there's some more island-inspired songs like Too Good and Controlla. I mean, they aren't bad, and some have some instrumental flavor if it's very desaturated, because the synths are very cold and chilly, and Drake's crooning his way through an auto-tune patois just feels kind of awkward. It doesn't really fit for him. That's where we get to songs like Faithful, where Drake just completely falls off the beat on the hook, and you couldn't tell me what the melody is in that instrumental. And that's a consistent issue across this entire project. For as much as it is concerned with atmosphere, the tracks that landed with a little bit more impact were probably 9 or Still Here or Grammys. Sure, none of the melodies are great, and the trap production was generic as hell, and Drake has had more punch in the production with the Future collaboration last year, but at least they felt like finished songs. This, on the other hand, look folks, I don't know if this will end up being Drake's worst album, but it feels the least necessary Drake album. He's reached the point where he could effectively release anything and it would chart and sell and land on the Hot 100, but why release this? Why the content that feels so tired and regurgitated, and the production that lacks consistent grooves or melody or even quality? There's no arc or consistent themes to the album. For as long as it goes and for as few unique ideas are on this album, it feels stretched and incredibly undercooked, especially with the framing that never takes the full step to painting Drake with any real self-awareness. That said, there are songs that I mostly like, enough of them, like Weston Street Flows, Keep the Family Close, Too Good with Rihanna, and maybe the title track or 9 in a Pinch, that saves the album from being outright bad, but it's right on the edge of mediocrity, so it's getting a 5 out of 10 and only a recommendation for hardcore Drake stans. And even in that case, if you compare this to So Far Gone or Nothing Was the Same, or especially Take Care, or even if you're reading this as too late, I see views coming up really, really short. Sorry. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can't imagine how this review is going to be controversial at all, but hey, if you guys got some comments on it, I got the poll up here. What did you guys think of the album? Do you think it managed to work despite its length? Do you think it's one of his best projects yet? Or do you think it falls short of the albums that you could say are legitimately great coming from Drake? I'm actually kind of curious of your opinions, because I can imagine this album would be quite divisive. Beyond that, anything else you want me to cover in upcoming weeks, I'll try to give it a listen, or anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Till then, I'm Mark from the 6, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.